My primary medium is encaustic, which is an ancient Greek and Roman process of using hot wax and a damar crystal, which is a tree sap from Malaysia, and pigments, and you melt those on a hot palette, and then I paint on wood. So that's the primary medium that I show in, but I'm also, I really love materials, so I also work in gouache and watercolor. I've had a sketchbook practice for a long time, so I love to draw. I do small hand-built ceramics. Carrie Mosman is a teacher that I've had for several years doing burnished pots. And then I also learned how to do stained glass. So I do some pieces in glass, some printmaking, some lithographic printmaking on glass and stained glass. I work best when I'm working on a series, so I identify kind of the parameters of that series. And then within that series, I'll often have kind of series within a series. So for instance, this last project that I worked on, one series was working specifically from historical photographs from my family. So I'll find a photograph that I like, I'll draw that on wood, I'll paint with that on the wax on the wood, and then I start letting surprises happen. So I'll start experimenting with the medium. This is like the playhouse. So it has all of my materials, it has an altar to my processes, it has a dedicated space so that I can come and go and don't have to clean up what I'm working on. So for me, having a studio space is absolutely essential to being able to be an artist. I have very limited time frames in which I can work. And so for me, it is being very disciplined and carving out money to have a studio, time to be in that studio, and then developing, having very internally motivated projects that I identify myself and work towards. Art is the way that we share with each other and with ourselves what's important to us. So it's part of how we communicate our stories about our culture, our families, who we are, our identity. So for me as a maker, it is part of how I process the world and understand my own experience as a human. And then it is part of how I then connect with other people and share that and have conversations about that and hopefully inspire other people to think about things that they might not have thought about otherwise. Being an artist in Boise has actually been a wonderful thing for me. One, I think financially, to be able to afford a studio space outside of my home has been great. I have felt really welcome in this community. I feel like the artist community in Boise is very encouraging. I found a great support system. I think that the thing that is difficult in Boise is that there's not a lot of opportunities to show, and there's not as many people who are serious collectors. Oftentimes people will collect work from other cities or other locations. If I were to try to make a living as an artist, I wouldn't be able to do it. So I'm grateful that I have a day job and that I make money in a different way. But that said, I have as many opportunities as I want to show. I've always been able to make that happen. I feel like Boise is a fertile place to be an artist. And for me, it's also been important to share that, so that to have other artists continue to work here and stay and be here. That community of artists is really important to me, as friends, as colleagues, as encouragers. I've met a lot of people who begin as makers and then they become administrators and let go of that maker part of their life. So for me, it is to hold on to the love and passion and value of being a maker and continuing to find inspiration in the world, and then giving myself permission to do the work, to make things. And I think oftentimes as being an adult, people see spending time or materials or money on art making as something that is silly or extra or a hobby, therefore not worthy. And for me, it's to continue to value that part of who I am and what I do in the world. Because I feel like everybody has something to say, and that experiencing the world through the process of making is really gratifying. So I do understand that not everyone will choose to do that as invest in a level that people who, like myself, feel this great passion to do it, but I feel like it's something that everyone can do in some capacity. I think for me, the other piece is that I'll continue to make work because it's how I understand what it means to be human. When I stop making work, that's when I stop. That's when I'll stop. So I think it's something I will do until the day I die.
What's your primary medium?
Watercolors and acrylic ink.
I painted with acrylic paints my whole life. And then I stopped painting when I traveled and lived in Australia for a bit, and then back to New Zealand and then to America eventually. So I stopped painting for a while, and then one of my artist friends introduced me to inks, and I experimented with those for a bit, and then from there I jumped over to watercolors, and I just really liked how they blended and all of the colors kind of came together to create sort of a galaxy effect, which I kind of fell in love with. I've always been interested in space. Some of my favorite classes have been physics. One of my favorite classes at Boise State was Stars and Cosmology that I took in my freshman semester. And experimenting with those inks, seeing how they came together and how they replicated that space feel, it just got my brain thinking, how can I experiment more with this medium and incorporate something that I love? I've always been interested in media production. I did a degree in media arts, and I wanted to somehow blend my love for production with my painting. So one day I took out my phone, I taped it to a little tripod that I had. I actually got a slab of wood and attached that to the tripod and then taped my phone to that wood so it was directly overhead my painting. And then I just did a time lapse on my phone, and from there I experimented with a new camera I bought, and then ever since then I've just been filming basically all of my paintings. These past 2 years, what's motivated me has been seeing my following grow and seeing the reaction strangers have had to my art, seeing people be inspired by my art and wanting to recreate it. That's kind of what's made me keep going, even though it's been so difficult with balancing everything in my life. So now that I have graduated, I'm kind of trying to find some inspiration because that's what's driven me, and I really don't want that to be driving me anymore because I want to do art for me and not for strangers online, if that makes sense. So I'm trying to find a balance between being able to grow my following still, but in a way that makes me feel fulfilled and happy. I always wanted to be a cartoonist growing up, so I've always loved drawing cartoons. And before I even painted anything, I was drawing when I was growing up. I don't think I ever even touched acrylic paints until I was maybe like 16. So with my watercolors, I just thought it would be cool to start incorporating cartoon drawings, and they're some of my favorite pieces of work that I create. I get a real kick out of looking up an image and then going and drawing it freehand, and then once I'm done, like looking at the two and seeing how similar they are, and it just makes me feel really proud. When I first started out, I was doing a lot of landscape pieces, and I wanted to find a way that was interesting and unique to kind of distinguish myself from all the other watercolor artists online. So I thought maybe if I incorporated some shapes, it would make it a little bit more interesting, and that's actually the first video that really blew up. It was a diamond painting of a night sky with trees all along the side, and from there, I just really liked the way it looked. I honestly can't remember how I started doing it, but since then, no matter what I'm painting, I'd say about like 50% of the time I just kind of incorporate a shape into it because I like the clean look of when I post to have the watercolor paper around and a writing utensil or a pen or a paintbrush along the side. I was just at Fred Meyer and I saw some masking tape and I thought, why not experiment with that since I've been trying to do all these shapes. So it's literally just Scotch masking tape, and I just draw out my diamonds or any of my shapes or anything that I want masked, and then I lay down the tape and it just stops the paint from bleeding and creates those really sharp lines. It just makes me happy. I don't know why. Ever since I was a kid, I can't explain it. Just drawing and painting makes me happy. Now that I'm a little bit more free, I'm definitely excited to look at all the exciting art opportunities there are in Boise.
You know, I don't really have a primary. I kind of go back and forth between painting and sculpting. Most of the time it's either one or the other, but sometimes I'll have I have a bust that I've painted over there. You know, I might paint small areas, but for the most part it's glazed sculptures and then paintings on wood. I feel like I've always just had an urge to make things. Even, you know, when I was young, I liked to glue rocks together and make creatures out of rocks. I drove my mom crazy because I never wanted to throw any of the boxes away from our fast food, and I'd make Kleenex boxes or, you know, money banks or whatever out of the boxes. And so I think I've just always liked repurposing or making things. I was able to take classes at Fort Boise in pottery and ceramic sculpture, which really opened up that whole love of clay for me, which I hadn't discovered until I was 29, I think. You know, having that facility has been great. Being around all the other outstanding potters that are down there was inspiring. And then I was lucky enough to meet a person, Artie Tate, who really helped me get into the galleries in Boise. And so I felt so lucky that, you know, those doors opened up for me. And then the public art opportunities that I've had too are opportunities I don't know that a lot of people have where they live. And I think that that's another real benefit of being here in Boise is the vibrant public art scene. Most recently I was reading a taxidermy book and I saw somebody had made a double-headed sheep or something out of taxidermy. And so that inspired me to make a double-headed goat out of clay. Something that's been inspiring me a lot lately is movable art, so kinetic sculptures. Most often they're made out of wood, but I've been trying to make some kind of movable sculptures out of clay, and then also incorporating wood and paint as well with that. I'll see something and I'll see one element that I think, I bet I could make that one element. So then I try to reproduce that and then it turns into its own piece. For me, I'm lucky because it's a stronger drive for me than like watching TV. And so if I'm, you know, home alone, that's typically what I tend to do is try to make something. I'm really good at starting projects, not as good at finishing them. So sometimes I'm motivated by seeing all the things I've started and then I'm like, I really got to finish that thing. So then I'll make time to make that happen. But that is definitely a challenge, especially when my career isn't an artistic career during the day. So it is something I have to carve out time for specifically. But it's just kind of a drive I have, I guess. It's hard to create when you have to like put everything away, or if you don't even have room to put everything away every day and you're creating in your living space, it's definitely a challenge. So I think that being able to have a space is really huge. So art, I think, means that you're basically interpreting something. And I guess it goes back to, you know, what you find inspiration in. So for me, if I find inspiration in this one element of something that I've seen, I'm gonna, you know, I want to try to interpret it. And I guess I feel like that's what all of us are doing. You know, when they say that no artist is original, I think it's true in a way, like that we're all reinterpreting something that's already been interpreted before, but it's original in the way that we interpret it. So I guess that's what art means to me. And I also feel like it's something bigger, almost like speaking through you. You know, when you get inspired, it's coming from some other place that I'm not really sure where that is, but something is speaking to you and you're just driven to give that thing a voice. Even if you carve out, you know, a small chunk of time, and you know, ideally every day, but it might not even be every day, it might be every other day. You keep something within you alive that's going to sustain you through all the other things you do, if it's parenting, if it's your day job, if it's, you know, whatever else. I think just being in touch with that creative side of yourself helps you be true to yourself and helps you feel better about everything else you're doing. I also think that it's a matter of building momentum. So even though it's easy to get discouraged, it's, you know, once you build that momentum, it just gets easier. And it is hard at times. Like sometimes I'll look around and see all the stuff I've created just sitting here and I think, why am I gonna make one more piece to end up in my basement or end up on my shelf? Then the next day someone says, oh, I saw this piece of yours, it's so great. And I think, okay, that's why I keep making it. It's to have conversations with people too. I guess I just feel really grateful to the teachers that I've had in my life, you know, traditional and non-traditional. Teachers at Fort Boise, the people that are down there working at Fort Boise, the students, and, you know, the people that have mentored me, taken me under my wing, the people that have even like given me feedback on my stuff and, you know, commented on my website or, you know, that. I'm so grateful for all that because that's what keeps me going.
Primary medium is spray paint, aerosol mixed with latex paints. Sometimes it depends on the job or the project, but my first love is spray paint. Mainly from graffiti. Just growing up, you know, as a teenager, playing around with spray paint, doing letter forms, that kind of stuff, and that introduced me to basically art in general. My motivation comes from just a pure buildup of ideas, you know, that I can't stop really getting the ideas, and if I don't act on them, it almost like hurts me. You know, I get inspiration from the people I paint with, my crew, all sorts of people I've met, and other artists in the Boise area and nationally, globally, all sorts of inspirations in my house, my lady, my daughter. You know, it kind of comes from everywhere, and all those factors just make me want to go and do something cooler, better, newer. Most of my designs are following kind of a path of ideas that have been developed over the years. My individual work, I kind of just bring whatever influences I'm feeling that day into it and try to work it out on the wall. I love painting on walls, especially large walls, because it's something that is a fixture, and especially if it's in a public place, you know, anybody can walk by and have their own interaction with it at any given time. I like painting on a large scale like that because if it's larger than you, the work will like envelop you and draw you into it in a way that you can't really achieve that easily with a smaller piece or a canvas. I'm a native Boisean, and I'm like third generation, so I know this place well. And when I was growing up and just starting into it, it wasn't very developed in the kind of art that I do. And so now being able to work at it full time, it's a pretty cool way to sculpt and mold the city in an image that I see it deserves. I think that what I do in the portraiture and realism stems directly from graffiti that I did. So without that, there wouldn't have been, you know, the style that I work in now. So I try to relate that to people and at least open people's minds a little bit to that as a stepping stone or as a, you know, integral part of what a lot of these big murals you see, where they come from and how they're created. I've actually been in arguments with police officers about the definition of graffiti and if it's legal, but if it's on a legal space, but it's still in the graffiti form, does that make it, what does that make it? You know, it's there's been some funny things, but over the years, I think it's, like I said, been developed into a little bit more acceptable way to work. Right now, my focus is really developing the concepts that I want to be heard and want to see in our city and in the world, and making that more of a priority in my life and in my art expression. You know, it's a way to do something more fulfilling, I feel like, in the long run. And at some point, there's that transition where a lot of artists feel that push. It's just a really direct way to talk to people, to speak to people on your terms and on their terms. I think art is just one of the rare places where you can communicate with somebody very directly. Those people are going to interact with that, and whatever goes through their mind when they're looking at that is something that is a conversation you're having with them directly through the art. I'm just thankful for the people that are in Boise, both the artists and just the residents who have kind of made it a priority to include these things in the city and its life. I don't see stopping ever. I think it can mutate and morph into all sorts of different manifestations. I like to sketch too. I like to do digital drawings. I like to paint occasionally. And I don't see why those things can't all interact in some way that keeps me interested. And there's a puzzle that'll never be solved, or, you know, you never get to the end of being creative. So I think it's something that'll keep me stimulated forever.
My inclination is to say that I'm a metalsmith because that was where my formal education lies. But I see kind of community engagement and social practice work as sort of also a secondary or like tertiary medium for me. I do quite a bit of other things, writing, sculptural works, photography, community work. Yeah, so I guess metals and then a lot of other things from there. I would say that I don't just sit down and say, I'm going to be creative. it's just sort of like always spinning and always working in my brain. You know, all these different ideas are kind of all happening at the same time. It's just sort of like every second I'm moving through my day, ideas are happening or I'm processing through something. And my studio is really a place where I can be quiet with those ideas and be experimental. I guess for me, whatever is happening in here is like a tangible or visible way to like process everything that's happening elsewhere. Space for an artist or creative person, I feel like is part of the deal. I've lived in spaces where there is not enough room to have this type of workshop space or this type of experimental space, and it is really difficult to do the work and to kind of explore the ideas you need to explore. So I feel like without a dedicated space, whether that's shared or solo, it's pretty close to impossible to really do the work that you need to do. Without space, I don't think I could be doing what I'm doing. I'd have to probably make different work. The work that I'm doing is on surface very architecturally driven. It's exploring forms and shapes that you would see in some of the spaces that I'm occupying outside of my studio. But it's also looking at sort of the psychology of architecture and how we occupy space and memory and our memories of spaces. Ever since I was in school, I really loved soldering. And soldering for me is usually soldering hollow forms or some kind of form together. It's a kind of an integral part of metalworking, but it's one of the stages that I really enjoy the most because it's super precise. You have these little tiny solder chips that you have to very delicately balance on the edge of a little teeny wire or the edge of a sheet of metal. And the art of not getting them to bounce off while you're heating up the metal and it's getting ready to flow has been like almost like a dance performance for me. I mean, it's really just like identifying the stages of how the metal heats up and where you watch how the flux evolves as you're heating it up and it gets to a certain point and then you can narrow your torch in and solder something. I guess I really love that metal is typically so hard and so cold and so challenging to work with, but when you get with a torch, it really makes working with metal seem more fluid and more, I don't know, just I guess easier to work with than just kind of hand tools. I had a little internship in high school working in a mechanic shop, and I really loved just like the materiality of being in this shop and like getting messy and being able to like kind of just experiment with torches and all these different like hand tools. And I was rebuilding starters and for like a fleet of trucks that would come into this mechanic shop, and so there was something about just the ability to like shape metal that was really interesting to me, or to work with such a hard material. The opportunities that Boise, and particularly like Idaho at large, but mainly Boise, has given me has been the whole, I think, impetus for where I'm at right now. I mean, it's such a safe environment to experiment and to be kind of weird or try new things, and ultimately it's a super supportive place, super supportive community. The stakes are a little bit lower. I couldn't basically live without this. It's such a form of my being that it's sort of just inherent to who I am and what I do. Everything that I'm doing right now, whether it's running the Atlanta School or cultural sites at the city of Boise, or writing for various arts magazines, or working in my studio, like they're kind of one and the same, and it's sort of all in which my life is made up of. I do it because I can't not do it.
I primarily work in printmaking. Printmaking is a really sort of vast field within the arts, within visual arts. It incorporates a lot of different techniques. And so within printmaking as an overarching umbrella, I tend to focus on monotypes, intaglio process, and relief. there's a lot of different possibilities, a lot of different options in how you get to creating a final image. So I like the materials, I like the process. It's almost like there's definitely some science involved. It's kind of almost like a pseudoscience maybe, so it's this interesting intersection between materials, image making, alchemy maybe sometimes. I had one class in high school that was a printmaking class. I was fortunate to go to a school that had a pretty robust arts program, and just something about the process I think drew me in at that point in time. We got to go on a visit to the local university, and the printmaking studio was in the basement of this old building. It was dark, pretty dirty. All this heavy equipment and chemical processes happening. So again, I come back to like kind of that intersection of like sort of the arts and sciences, material, process heavy. It's something about the process that I think really ultimately drew me in. A lot of it comes from, for me, trying to describe ideas or feelings or thoughts or observations that I have about life. Things that might be difficult to express through words or through language. Maybe it's trying to express things that don't have language assigned to them, certain experiences, certain feelings. I grew up in New England and I've lived out west now for just over 10 years. And so the landscape was something that I hadn't really focused on before, but after spending so much time in the landscape and in the vast open landscapes of the West, I think that's definitely had a pretty big impact on my work. Most recently, I've fallen into a very solitary practice, which is also something that I need. Work is very demanding socially, and I wouldn't necessarily always consider myself a very social person, so the ability to come into this space and have the space for myself, as selfish as that seems, it helps me feel successful and healthy in the other areas of my life, to be able to have quiet time to be with myself, I guess. I think it's a different way of looking at the world through the lens of being a visual artist, noticing things, creating commentary, bringing those things into dialogue with other people. Fortunately, I don't have to make them a living through making my work, so I do have sort of the pleasure to be able to explore the things that I want to do versus doing things that I know will make money. My practice is rooted in doing this for me. And doing what I want to do. Boise's been really good to me, and I didn't know anybody. I went to Boise State, and I just started showing up to things. There's like all the art openings that my professors were having, that friends were having, that other older students in the program were having. Just showing up and talking to people, and I think it's one of the best things you can do within any arts community is to show up and support other artists. And I think eventually that support will come back to you. Right when I graduated from Boise State, I was accepted into the 2017 Idaho Triennial at the Boise Art Museum. That was a great sort of validating experience. I just got accepted again to the Triennial, so the 2020 Idaho Triennial at Boise Art Museum. Again, that's another great point of validation in terms of motivation to come to the studio. I'm not explicitly making work for that type of validation, but when you do receive that type of recognition or that validation, it's really meaningful to say, my time here is well spent. Art is extremely important to me, not just in my day-to-day life, being in the studio, making. I've dedicated my professional life to it. It really has become integral to everything that I do in my life. Being able to have the freedom to express yourself in whatever manner, whatever way, through whatever means, I think is an extremely important part of being a human being. Being able to let other people know what your experience is like, how you're dealing with life, what your thoughts are. Maybe it's cathartic to be able to get some of these things out of your head. Probably the most powerful thing that art can do is bring people together to talk about ideas, to share emotions. And I think art will always have that place, because I do think that certainly there's art that's motivated by money, but in a large part, our art's not motivated by anything else other than that individual maker's vision to say something, whatever that may be.
I moved to Boise in '79 and started Classic Design Studio in 1989. Actually worked out of this garage studio for 10 years, and then we moved into a studio downtown. I was always artistic, and I felt that if there was a way that I could be artistic and be independent and make a living, that's what I wanted to do. I love to draw, and I love to draw letters, and letters are my anatomy, and words are my landscape. So I just love putting letters together. I love seeing letters dance together. You know, and it's always really important to me that if letters are together, you can read them. It's not just drawing things that are so abstract that you can't read, but because I'm in the sign industry, it has to read. It has to work as a sign. But you know, just putting letters together and putting ornamentation around them is, it's the art of it to me. I went to art school in Chicago after I got out of the service, and with the VA bill, I was able to go to art school for 2-3 years, and then it was an art school where focused on lettering and design and layout, and so I learned letter structure, I learned layout and composition at very early age in my career, and my love of letters was probably formed in those 2 or 3 years. I usually start with a really rough sketch, and then I'll look at that rough sketch, and sometimes I've already got the design in my head. You know, I can get a lot of the basic stuff put inside my head and see how I want the letters to start forming together, and then I'll start drawing, and that's when the real art of the lettering and the spacing, and of course always make sure it's spelled right. And then I'll do overlays, and usually a typical sketch will take 4 to 6 hours. I like to think that they're timeless, but most of them are kind of vintage type. So, you know, I refer to a lot of the historic books that were printed in the 20s, 30s, and 40s, and that's what has influenced me the most. You know, and when I'm drawing like this, I just lose time, you know, and I don't look at anything that I draw as like a waste of time. I just look at it as an exercise. About 5 years ago, I got a Frank Lloyd Wright book from my daughter, and it was on all his pencil sketches. And in the book, there was a little note that said, Dad, you know, you really do nice pencil sketches. You should think about doing a book. And that was the basic influence for us to start thinking about even producing a book. Being an artist, and then being a tradesman, and being a designer, and then being able to draw something and then knowing while I'm drawing it that I can make it, and there's nothing better than that. I look at what I do as it gives me joy, and I really appreciate the fact that I can still do this at my age, and I still feel like I'm learning and growing, and you know, I feel like the art itself is timeless. And I like looking at these drawings after I'm done with them and going, oh, that's really nice. Or you know, I can improve on this or make some changes on that to make it really nice. I like drawing and designing things that will get made and will get reproduced. And I'd be happy designing birdhouses or, you know, anything. As long as I got a pencil in my hand and designing, and I'm the builder, I'm a maker. You know, I love putting designs together that will end up in a project. I would encourage anybody that feel that they want to have a life in art, that they should find their niche and then go for it. And then just feel like if you really want to do this and you really love doing it, do it. And you know, just dedicate yourself to it. And if you can't do it full-time, do it part-time, but do it because it really brings joy to your life. I earned, you know, my living working with my hands. We built a business with our creativity, and I still have a wife and kids that love me. Does it get any better than that?
I bounce between traditional painting, using stuff like Posca pen, markers, stuff like that, and digital. Growing up skateboarding, I started skating when I was 12. Some of the first art that I saw was like, that I really enjoyed was, you know, skateboard graphics. You know, whether it was like Toy Machine, Blind, Zero. I was always drawn to that stuff, and I remember I used to draw all over my binders, like the little Blind logo or the Toy Machine Devil logo. And then from there, I found out about the artists that made the boards, like Ed Templeton, Margaret Kilgallen, Barry McGee, and I think those are all artists that I grew up admiring, and I definitely draw inspiration from those artists, and I think that's got a lot to do with like the style that I work in, very kind of bold, graphic shapes and colors. I just think I've always loved creating art since I was a little kid. I've always enjoyed like making my own little flip book animations. I remember stealing my parents' like little Post-it notes and doing like Dragon Ball Z, you know, like little stick figure animations. And I guess I just never kind of grew out of it, so it's always something that I do. I love creating imagery. You can reach a bigger audience with a message through your artwork, especially right now since I've been touching on a lot of subjects of growing up as a first-generation Mexican American. When I did a show, I'll have people that grew up like me and come up and like they're stoked on what I'm doing. It kind of excites them to see that, you know, like these people that work so hard are getting kind of, you know, they're getting honored, which I feel like in Idaho, you don't see a whole lot of at the moment. I could be wrong, but just as far as like public art goes, you don't see a whole lot of those stories being told. Definitely grew up in a community where I saw like a lot of the people that were immigrating here and kind of the jobs they did. And lately it's been kind of nice in a way. It's almost like honoring kind of like the people that sit on the side of the street and sell corn, you know, or the guy that pushes the ice cream cart for hours in the summer. And I think it's kind of cool to honor that. I think it pushes me to follow my dreams and do that, just seeing like how hard these people work. It's definitely inspired by a lot of stuff that I grew up seeing when I would go visit Mexico. A lot of the colors I would see, a lot of the colors you still see in like the architecture, lots of teals, bright pinks, yellows. It's so nice to be able to like do your work in one room, and then when you're done, go into another room and sleep and not be like surrounded by it all the time. Because it definitely, I think it is nice to be able to step away from it, go into a different room in your house or wherever you are and kind of just like separate yourself from it, take a break. Because for me, it's always better to step away from a painting, look at it with fresh eyes, you know, be able to come back and see if I see anything versus just like always looking at it and always being in there. It's kind of nice. At first I was kind of like, I don't know, I saw Boise as a small community, and I guess I just never really knew many artists, but I can definitely say now that it's offered a lot to me, just, you know, from Prestige Skate Shop, growing up, knowing those guys, doing work with them, and I think just the smaller community, word gets around, like you do one project for somebody, they recommend you to somebody else. At first it kind of did seem hard, like I just didn't know what I was doing. There was kind of no guidance. I was just like, just kind of floating there, and I would get commissions here and there. And I think it was after I got a few bigger ones, like Prestige Skate Shop had me design a board for them, which led to another job for helping JD's Bodega design some of their logo work and some of the stuff that's printed on their merch. And then it just kind of kept growing and growing, and one thing kind of led to another. I mean, I think the ultimate goal for me is to be able to do this as a living, to be able to just survive and be able to, you know, buy a house one day, be able to do all that stuff just from creating art. I think it's something that I've realized that I don't want to live any life that isn't less than a creative life, you know, even if it means like working at a grocery store, and then doing my art stuff on the side. But I think to me, that's more satisfying than maybe, you know, getting a job that I don't like but pays me well. Even if one day I had to, you know, I realized like I couldn't do this for forever, I think it's something I'll always still do, always still paint, always still doodle. I've done it since I was a little kid, and I definitely don't see it stopping anytime soon.
I started 7 years ago, and it's just been a wild ride. It's been really fun, just like discovering, okay, like, wow, I'm actually kind of good at this. You know, let's see how far we can like push this whole discipline and see where it takes me. I knew it wasn't like the thing I'd be doing like when I'm 80. I know that, but it is something that still piques my interest. It's still relatively fun, but I'm, you know, now I'm getting into all these other mediums and stuff, and I guess I've always been like a mixed media kind of guy. I started with pencil when I was a kid, like everybody else, you know, pencils and crayons and stuff. I think the only difference is I didn't stop. I think that's probably like the biggest strength is just like, I guess, being too dumb to quit, you know? I got a CNC machine, I have a 3D printer, I have like basically all the tools that you would use for like creating something, and really like imagination first projects. So it's like, okay, like let's not be limited by what these machines can do. Let's just throw off the limits. What do you want? You know, a guy asked me for a agave necklace with like diamonds in it, and I'm like, I'm not a jewelry maker. I don't know like the first thing about like anything as far as jewelry goes, but I'll figure it out. And I kind of make the joke, I'm kind of like a doctor. You pay me to practice, and I want to serve customers in a way where if they had an idea, I'd just be like, yeah, we can do that. My inspiration, I think, just comes from just being receptive to today and just figuring out, okay, what are we gonna do today? I guess what excites me most is the unknown, and like that's what keeps me going. Is like I think just the fact that I can keep going, that there is no limits. I pay to play, so I pay my dues. I get rid of those work orders that I have on the wall, so that I can pay for the monetary things, but then like also buy back time. And that what I do with that time is I learn how to use like these pieces of equipment, and I just explore the possibilities, you know. And really, it's just playing. You know, kids are good at it, and somewhere along the way, like we just figure out, or we lose the sense of like how we play. But it's in playing that you learn the most. People are coming to me for like mural work. They're coming to me for like creative stuff, and that's cool. Like I feel like I've paid my dues. I'm kind of hitting that tipping point where now it's kind of an easy ride down. But once it becomes easy, it becomes boring, you know? So now I'm like, okay, how can we like move this momentum that we already have? How can we steer it in a way where I'm actually doing like more of the ideal work? I'm like encouraging others to like pursue their passions and creating opportunities for artists that are green and don't have like any business sense, getting them experience and like helping them figure out like how to do an invoice. You know, the boring shit that everybody's like, I don't want to do that, I just want to get out there and paint. I think art is important because it's the most beautiful love child of all the disciplines. You know, like I always tell people, like it's a fast track. If you want to learn something, art is like a fast track to learn that thing in an exciting way. Like I don't know shit about welding. In high school, like I had this art project that involved welding. So they're like, whoa, we got to get you into the welding class so you can finish your project. I'm like, hell yeah, let's do this. And I get in the welding class, and I look over, and there's a bunch of kids like through this window. They're all like doing paperwork. I asked one of the other welding students, and I'm like, what are they doing over there? They're like, oh, they're in welding class. I'm like, they're doing paperwork? They're all, yeah, you have to do like a month or 2 months worth of paperwork before you can even touch a welder. I'm like, I didn't do any of that shit. Like, fast track, baby. I think that's the most important thing about art, is that we just understand like it is like, it's involved with everything and it involves everything. You know, it takes all of you to express yourself like artistically. What other discipline does that, where it takes all the disciplines, you know? It's like it has like the monopoly on all disciplines. Like I don't need status. I need people to understand that like you can create at the same level that I'm creating. You're just gonna have to pay your dues, that's it. It's a small price to pay, you know, especially for like what you get out of it. You get like an endless life of like more creating and more learning, and it's just like, you know, it just works for itself.
I like aerosol cans because the vibrancy of the color is easier to control, because I do a lot of masking tape. So every layer of color that are on my current works or the bigger works is 2 to 3 cans of paint. And there's something that's, I guess it's more of like a meditation when I do my work. So that, and the smell's kind of sweet. This is gonna sound really corny, but when I was in 4th grade, I drew a perfect circle by freehand. And I didn't understand the concept of drawing at that time, because I just saw like Calvin and Hobbes was my kind of my upbringing in the comic books. And I just said, you know what, let's just start with the basics. I drew a circle, and then that circle's always in my work. But comic books, I started to emulate drawing those, and I just started the art from a young age. My parents basically let me paint on the walls in my room, giant Sonic Hedgehog, you know, or make t-shirts, creating my own characters that were emulating Bill Watterson's illustrations. So I created a couple different little characters from that, and that's where my, I guess, genesis for art started. At BSU, I had a minor in Mesoamerican Studies, and I consumed so much knowledge that I had no idea about my own heritage except for the stereotypical things that I was watching, like lowrider culture, movies that my dad would watch while I grew up, the Westerns, of course. But I think you would probably just call it like a hybridization, because I figured, well, I've had this word in my mind since college. It was called liminality. So it's the state of being betwixt and between two worlds. And so what I'm trying to do as I scale up my artwork is create a place where people will look at work, but they won't really feel like they're part of it, but displaced by looking at it. And that's where the optical effects come into play, is I'm trying to get them to engage with it, and at the same time for it to disengage them in a way. I think that art defines time, from like the beginning Caves of Lascaux, right? And then from what I was talking about with my heritage, the muralists of Mexico. And so then you got Banksy, right? He's making all of these works right now that are social commentary. Like, I think art defines the time. And then right now, there's gonna be all these whole new sets of artists that are coming out of this coronavirus, right? And then this inequality that's happening, or that has been happening before coronavirus. But we define time, and it's very important that we never lose our voice. My big, I don't want to say it's an issue, it's just how I function, is right. I don't think in terms of linearity, but I can always come back to something, always again. So coronavirus may not be something that's in my work right now, or I've seen it in the works of the past, or maybe it'll just pop up later. It's all intuitive for me. I like the subconscious to like have a little bit more play than the conscious part of making decisions in art. Trying to create a voice in art in Boise that would welcome people into Latin culture, right? And so I'm visually trying to do that with the colors, right? Colors, everybody loves colors, and people love design. So those are the two things that I'd like to focus on in my works. Regardless if they can identify with the cultural aspects to it, it's not really that important. The important part is that when they look at the work, they see that there is an experience to be had. There's this whole 20th century, end of 20th century idea that you have 8 seconds with art, right? And then it's gone. Whereas I'm trying to find a way to incorporate people to spend time with the work again, be lost in the work. And that's why I'm trying to scale up so they can be lost. And that's where that whole liminality thing comes in. It's like, let's get them lost. Why not? That's where meditation can happen, and where it begins when you look at art. I see art like poetry. You know, I really didn't get into poetry until I took a hybrid class in grad school. It was a lit and art class they sandwiched together, right? So I didn't really understand how words and art worked together or influenced each other. So I see like poetics in object, I see poetics in work, and that's where I really respect minimal works, where they speak so much more with so little. Though that's not what I do, obviously. But I'm not really making a comment on social things going on right now. I'm just trying to create a space to maybe get lost into, like to be distracted by work versus being influenced by it, by some social conversation, right? I mean, if someone finds something within the work that they identify with related to political, or whatever, that's them. That's the beauty of art.
It's primarily tattooing before the COVID. Sure. But I enjoy basically all mediums. Charcoal's probably one of my favorite. Drawing, painting, watercolor, acrylics, and I mean, I like it all. Yeah, since I can remember, like holding crayons, I've been making art. I've been tattooing. This month, I think, is my 11-year anniversary. I'm definitely given a lot more creative freedom with tattooing now than I used to be given in the beginning. But with painting, it's nice because there's like no control that anybody's really given me. Like they'll tell me to paint one thing, maybe if it's a commission piece, and I'll run with it, and just, it's nice to be able to figure out what other elements like I'll implement into it, or like I've just been really experimental lately with what I'm doing and just trying new things and that's been really nice. And it's a lot easier to be experimental painting versus with tattooing. I've been trying to just basically create without being too conscious of what I'm making. Like, it's difficult to explain my process. Like I'll kind of like scribble sometimes and start to see things and then roll with it or get another vision of something else that I'm wanting to do. I've definitely started way more projects than I finished, and it feels kind of good because I almost feel like I get these bursts of inspiration to start something new, and then I get it again and again and again. So I have a lot more work that's started than finished. I pull my inspirations from everything. Like, it could be nature has been really inspiring lately. I've been going out and just sightseeing and looking at canyons and like scenery. So I've really been into landscapes, and I got to go out and finally like do a little bit of there was a cliff that I was looking at, and I did a charcoal drawing of it, which was nice. And it's difficult trying to like just pick one piece of nature and trying to capture it. It's definitely a challenge, but it's nice once you can kind of like capture different aspects of the scenery. I love making art, like making a painting where I don't even know what it's going to be in the beginning, where it's just kind of like winging it, and like I know something will come out of it. The more time I put into it, it's going to just keep pulling something out of that, and I don't know exactly where it's coming from. Like, I feel like a lot of creativity and art is being pulled from the same place, especially with like visionary art. It's kind of something that's something I've always been into, as far as like just different perspectives of landscapes, like kind of compiled on top of each other with like different worlds cutting through and dimensions. And I've been trying to just build a new world, basically, or like bring more of my world through visually, so that maybe it could change this world in some way. Sometimes the motivation's not always there. You have to make your own motivation. You just have to push yourself, basically. Like, once I've started multiple things where I didn't feel like doing it, but I knew I needed to do it, or like there was something in me that told me that I need to do it, I guess. So basically, once I can work on something for an hour or more, I can eventually get immersed in it. And once I start to see something coming through, then at that point, it gets exciting, like knowing that something is going to be coming. I feel really lucky and blessed and just thankful that I can do that as a career. It wasn't easy. It was a lot of work to get to where I'm at, a lot of sacrifice, tattooing till 2, 3 in the morning, later sometimes. And especially like the beginning of tattooing, I didn't have a clientele. I'm not from here, so building a clientele was a really difficult thing to do. It took, 7, 8 years, I would say, to build a nice solid clientele. But I'm glad that I stuck with it, and just knowing all the crap that I had to go through to get to where I'm at, I feel good. I feel like nothing was given to me. I love to try to get people to be involved with art, and I think that everybody can be an artist, even people that say they can only draw stick figures. I also think art is a way of like decompressing. Just being stuck in your world can be stressful, and a way to escape it, at least for me, is to do art. Yeah, art's always going to be a part of my life. It's something that I was born to create, and I can't ever stop doing that.
Primary medium would definitely be pencil, ink, and just kind of paper, just kind of doodles that turn into anything. Either I'll bring it into another medium, or that's usually kind of the basis of anything I start. Just kind of spur of the moment ideas, or on a cocktail napkin with friends, or just kind of sitting at home, listening to some good music, and you just want to, doodle, just make something. Works out pretty good eventually. Probably one of my biggest motivators is music. Like, it's just, I've always wished I could play music, and it's just, I did when I was younger. I played like piano and keyboard and did that in junior high, but I just never kept it up. But it's always like finding a new song or finding something and just seeing how they experiment with that, and then kind of that bleeds into, I don't know, just a weird idea or abstract thought, and it just kind of comes out on the paper. And it's even just, putting in some like earbuds and just listening to something, or even if just go for a walk, just kind of seeing what's around and people. I definitely think just people watching is great too. I think that always just sparks instant ideas and wants me to like pull out or grab any paper I can and just kind of make a note or a mental note or just kind of draw something simple. I would say probably last year I definitely got some good foundations laid, and I think it's kind of weird how it works here in Boise. At least it kind of seems like you get a project and then it kind of spurs into something else, and it just kind of, the wheel keeps turning and people keep recognizing, and it just kind of slowly builds. But overall, I'd say I've gotten to where I wouldn't say live comfortably, but it's definitely something that, you know, puts money in the pocket or towards future projects. That helps out a lot. So, and that's even just meeting new people, or, you know, it's a trade where I help them out and they help me out somehow, and it works out. So I think that's more where I feel that I can live off of it, knowing that it's good work and it's good pay, but it's not really always just about the money on the table. It comes down to, you know, making new relationships and really kind of building that core group of followers that want to keep up with your work or really be interested in what you have to offer. I would say it's what keeps us human. I think it's one of those things that it can motivate people. It can push people to do things that they never thought they could do. But then I think it's also, you know, it can really set a mood and a tone with, you know, design and graphics and anything that you can do nowadays. It's pretty much endless, and it kind of controls kind of the landscape of how people live and how they want to live. So I think art's really important, and I kind of wish there were, you know, more opportunities here, but I think it's definitely growing. It's a consistent basis that is just blossoming into something that is gonna be something very soon. I can see it, finally, growing up here. So I kind of made a list of things I wanted to do, and it was like, you know, design a skateboard deck or do this, and it's just like little kind of art milestones you want to hit. And I feel like in like 1 year I just kind of crossed the whole thing off, and it was just knowing certain people and finding out they do this and that. And it was, you know, Tree Fort Music Festival, that was great. Knowing a lot of people over at the Maven shop, which is a really cool shop. Sad to see it go, but it's really awesome what they did for a lot of the people here. And yeah, it was just kind of eye-opening. It was just meeting another person, and they were like, led me to this. And yeah, I designed a beer label with Payette. Like it's crazy to see like the things you never thought you could do, but it's just like, it just happens, and you just don't really like sit back and realize it until after it's over that I've done all this, and it's kind of nice to see. I don't think I could ever stop doing it. It's just one of those things that are just, I've gotten to the point now where it's, if I don't have it, I can definitely tell there's a difference in how I react and how I act in my daily life, and it's something I have to, I think I'll always be, you know, walking around and carrying like a little like sketchbook or notepad or something just to keep it going, because I feel like it's like a muscle. It's that you just have to keep training. It's just to get either better or just to have fun with, and you just have to keep using it. And I feel like if you don't, it kind of either slows down or it just turns off, just, let's say, probably the fun creative side in your head, where you're just like, I just need to get this out. Like, you have an idea and you have the ability to put it out on paper, you might as well just use it and keep it going. So.
Primary medium that I use is, I have a day job where I do graphic design, and then I do painting with spray paint, airbrush, and then I just draw a lot. So I'm always doing drawing in my sketchbooks, and I do a lot of markers and pens, but I probably dabbled in a lot more than that. But I'd say my main focus when I do my art is acrylic and spray paint. I think I got introduced to art in my teens, early teens. I was exposed to graffiti, kind of the whole tag movement, or the whole tagging aspect of the graffiti world was just, you know, just tagging your name in these little areas in Texas where I grew up in. I get inspired by emotions and feelings. So if I'm feeling a certain way, I tend to choose a topic or a subject that to me represents what I'm feeling. And that to me starts off with, you know, an idea and then a sketch, and then I figure out how I want to execute it. Because like I said, I kind of work with different mediums. So, you know, if it's an idea that I feel needs to become a painting or a sketch or a digital drawing, or kind of let that, it's part of the process. So I let that idea, I don't know, just kind of dictate wherever that goes. I carry my sketchbook around, and you know, I usually jot down my ideas wherever I'm at. And you know, if I don't have a sketchbook, I start with the idea maybe on my phone, or just to kind of remember it. And you know, I think it's important to have that, you know, space to create and kind of get into the process and then create, you know. And you know, something about just being around all your supplies and materials and all this other things that go into it. I used to have a studio, an actual studio in Boise, downtown Boise, called Black Book for 8 years, and so I know what it means to have that space and having your customers come in and seeing the work and seeing the process, and you're having the space to actually create anything. And I now operate out of my garage, so I turned my garage into a studio. I think I create because I have to. It's just one of those things that early on I would just get into this zone that was about creating. It was about making. You know, it was about turning nothing into something. And I've always enjoyed the process and finding a solution to, you know, to a problem. And that's probably why I like graphic design, and I chose to be a graphic designer by trade, is because to me it's you know, it's a career, it's a job that's about solutions, you know, finding, you know, solutions to a problem. But I think with art and creativity in general, I think for me, I think everyone has creativity within them. And I think by nature we all create. I just happen to just continue with it and stick with it, and I've enjoyed the process of it. So I feel really good about it when I create, and I don't have to do it for anyone. I just do it because I love to do it, and I've always enjoyed that. And I think most artists feel that way. I think most artists feel like if they could create for themselves, you know, that would be the ideal gig, and maybe that's the goal at the end. But I think for now, I just, you know, follow my passion, follow what I love to do, and whatever pays the bills at this point, you know. I'm an artist, I think, by nature, and I've done different kinds of art. I'm always experimenting, you know, I'm always trying to push myself. One of the things nowadays I do is, because you know, a lot of my time is occupied with my day job and I want to stay creative and do creative stuff, I try to push myself to learn and grow as an artist, and that takes time. For me, it's important to grow as an artist, so I push myself. And if I'm doing a portrait, or if I'm doing a landscape, or if I'm doing whatever subject, I try to push myself to make it the best that I can, you know, and that means putting the time, and that means making time. And if you love something that you do, then you gotta make time for it.
Primary medium would be tattooing on the skin. Other than that, you know, it all started on a piece of paper and kind of just evolved into tattooing. My mom said I popped out with a pencil in my hand, so I was just sketching all the time, drawing comics, little like anime characters, like Dragon Ball Z stuff, like, you know, just kind of the average stuff at first. And then it kind of just moved on to graffiti. And graffiti was my main love for a solid 5 years or so while I was going to college. And I grew up in Nampa, born and raised. Been here my whole life. You know, at first I tried to escape, you know, because I grew up in like a rural area where, like, you know, there wasn't much to do. So kind of naturally boredom became creativity. and I started to draw, paint, you know, whatever it was to like pass the time. But I realized Boise's actually really cool. Like, it's growing, you know, it's a place where you can build something at this point, and I'm loving it so far. So I'm gonna stick around. I'll see myself moving. It's growing, and I want to show my daughters that, like, you could just focus on whatever it is that you love. Make sure you love it, because if you don't love it, it's gonna be tough. There's a lot of hurdles you gotta get through, like, with whatever it is you're going for. And like, what makes me wake up to try and kill it is just to like inspire my kids, and you know, whoever it is that wants to be inspired. You know, I just want to be an inspiration. I don't think I'll ever stop doing art. It's honestly something that is part of me that it's kind of like a medication, man. Like, when it comes down to it, if I'm not creating art, I get depressed. Like, no joke. I don't feel good. I'm not a good person to be around if I haven't like painted something or drawn something for myself or somebody else that I'm kind of excited to make for them. Tattooing is such a satisfying medium, especially one-shot tattoos. When you start and finish them, you get to see the process of kind of messy, not scratches, but like a messy beginning, and that ultimately manifests as a finished like piece that the person can wear for the rest of their life. And it's one of the best ways to create. Like, there's a lot of preparation that goes into it, and it makes it all that more satisfying. Like, once you finish a tattoo and you get to look at it and you know you put hard work into it, it's such a satisfying feeling. Maybe not immediately, because sometimes I'm dead beat tired and I can't appreciate it as much, but like later on I see them in person or look at the picture I took, and it's like, damn, that's cool. Like, I actually followed through with that, you know? Well, I believe art is a way of communication between an artist and their community, whether it be a tattoo or graffiti or a mural somewhere. It's a great way to communicate and express yourself, and a lot of times people have the same types of feelings when they look at a piece of art, and it's a nice way to escape from whatever thought that you might have had, whether it been negative or like troubling. Like, if you look at a piece of art, you're gonna wonder what it took to get to the finished product, and it's always like a journey. Like, one brush stroke leads to another, and the last brush stroke of the painting is very unique to that painting. So I don't think so, man. I think art's gonna stick around for sure as far as my life. And
my primary medium is oil paint on canvas, and then my secondary medium is watercolor and ink on watercolor paper. So inspiration for my oil paintings come a lot from the human body. I love figurative work. I absolutely love the idea of expressing tension, connection, kind of a push and pull through something as simple as a hand gesture or the pressure of fingers on skin or a look. And then I'd say for my watercolor work, I get inspiration, a lot of it actually from architecture. I used to work at an architecture library, and I kind of fell in love with buildings and lines and different planes, and has kind of blossomed from there. And then I have other work that's just inspired by my daily life. I'm a mom, and my son is in my next oil painting because he's around and he's cute and I wanted to paint him. So I kind of get it from all over. It's a way to connect with other people. My other love, other than art, is actually reading. One of the great things about reading is sometimes you'll find a character that does something that you thought you only did, something that's unique to you. And you recognize that and you connect with that person. And I think art, for me, does the same thing. I can put out an idea or a concept or a painting and have somebody look at that and connect to it in a way that maybe they thought was unique to them. I think that's my favorite thing about art, is being able to express a lot of things that maybe we don't talk about. So I think you have to realize what your motivations are for art. For me, I do it because I love it. And I think if you love it, why wouldn't you pursue it? You don't have to be good at it either to get something out of it. I think that art is for everybody. So for oil paintings, I do a layering technique. I start with really thin washes, and each layer of oil paint I build up with thicker and thicker paint. It's called fat over lean is the terminology. And what I love about oil paints is that it takes a really long time for them to dry, even when you add other mediums or drying agents. So I can actually go back and rework an area that I've been fiddling with. I can walk away and have a cup of coffee and come back to it and continue on that work. I actually find it easier to work on commission work because they provide structure and deadlines. It's harder for me to take the time for my own personal paintings. Also, watercolor is a much faster medium and something that I've been exploring more and more. And I really enjoy the process of even just mark making, if that makes sense. I can kind of zone out working on commissions in a way that I can't necessarily do on oil paints. A lot of times I'll just plug in an audiobook, put in my earbuds, and just kind of paint, and I lose track of time. I know for me that I used to have a definition of what makes a successful artist, and I did not measure up to that. And I think as I've gotten older and more mature, I've realized that you get to define what your success is as an artist, and you get to define what your career as an artist looks like, whether it's a hobby, whether you want to make money from it. What you want to get out of art is extremely personal, and you shouldn't ever let somebody else dictate what success means to you. And I think that for me, my original idea of what is success was being represented in a gallery, having my original oil painting sell, having the type of prestige of a gallery artist. And I realized doing these little commission watercolor illustrations for local moms that didn't bring me joy. That actually wasn't the success that I craved. And really just don't be afraid to define what success is to you in art and what you want to get out of it. Because for me, if I complete a painting and I'm happy and I think I made something beautiful, then I've succeeded. And I want other people to know that and not put unrealistic expectations on themselves, because that's how you don't paint. And everyone should be painting.
I work definitely with spray paint, and I work with acrylics, and a combination of those two. Sometimes, you know, a lot of the designs are ideas that are digitized and then executed on a wall or a canvas. I've been a pretty creative kid growing up, so that was always something I found interesting, was drawing and painting. I got into the aerosol spray type artwork when I was 13, 14, kind of when I got into like hip hop music too. My main influence was definitely hip hop culture, hip hop music, underground stuff. And it coming from Boise, that was weird because there wasn't a lot of that, and the little amount I did see, I kind of picked up on it from skateboarding. And that was what sucked me into, I guess, that culture. And then from there, it was like each day was a new page of learning stuff and like doing research on the internet, you know, because no one at the time was really doing that a whole lot. There were some writers here in town, but you didn't see a lot of graffiti at all. You saw it more in skate videos and skate magazines, and it just, I thought, was a really cool way to capture the culture. To me, it's important to express yourself, and that I feel is where I gravitate towards, like mural work or painting my name on something, you know, like it just adds a touch to something that might not be there, might be same boring gray blank wall, you know, but if I can find a way to flip it, I will. Like the scaling is the hardest part because you're going from like an 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper to a wall, and you want your letters to all be balanced and like the symmetry is there. I mean, for me, like it's geometry and angles and stuff, like that's how I scale stuff on a piece of paper to a wall, is really just check the angles, and like it's a weird process. And for like artwork wise, I haven't had to tap into using a projector quite yet, but I just, you know, hold the reference up to the wall, make sure it fits in the corners, and then just find points to plot and just start going to town. I mean, there's all sorts of approaches, and in my opinion, there's no wrong way to do it. But what works for me and what I take pride in is being able to show up to a space. If I have an image I want to work on, you're just doing it, you know? That to me is where what I learned in graffiti too, is just doing it. Like, you know, whether that's legal or illegal, you can figure out how to paint your name on that space and make it look tasteful. So it's almost easier to paint bigger. Like, it really is, because you aren't trying to focus so much detail on something small. If you can magnify something small to where it's like literally just, you know, a big, huge area, the amount of detail you have to put in that isn't as much as if you're trying to shrink down and work on a small scale. So I don't claim what I do as graffiti. I mean, what I do is mural work. Graffiti is like, to me, something that you do at night, like when no one's watching. But it's different. So I guess to classify it, some people might call what we do street art, but I don't like to call it that. Just because it's done with a certain medium doesn't mean it's street art. Street art is still, to me, like illegal shit. You're doing wheat paste, you're doing stencils, stickers, tags, like, you know, marker stuff. Graffiti is like straight up bombing with like paint and putting your name somewhere in a certain style and in a certain fashion. Everything's going to keep evolving with art, with anything. Here in Boise, I think they nurture the creatives. They give those people a platform as best as they can. And, you know, if you're an artist that's just learning how to do what you want to do, and if you want to put it in front of the people's eyes, you gotta embrace the failure, because it'll happen for sure. And like, you know, when that does occur to you as an artist, take that as like a golden token, you know, like you've earned a stripe almost, and figure out how to, you know, reinvent that situation to where it can get you further the next time. And don't be discouraged, because that is what happens, like, and that's what will straight up wipe artists' motivation from their heads, you know, and then they just will be like, oh, I tried that, you know. But you gotta be persistent and expect failure to happen. So that way when it does happen, you aren't like caught off guard. So yeah, I mean, that's some advice. I guess stay healthy too. That's all I gotta say.
Awesome. My primary is digital art. When I first was getting into art, being dyslexic, at first it didn't make sense to me. But when I started studying art in the graphic world and I started seeing everything through layers, it started to make sense to me. I was like, it was like this mind-boggling, like I would look at a painting and all of a sudden it would go, and I would be like, oh, that's the shading layer, and it was this ginormous epiphany for me in art where, you know, I'm still studying art every day, you know, I between lighting, shading, and coloring. And then I had this other moment where I really love tattoos. In fact, I find tattoos, it's like tattoo therapy is what I considered it. And one day I was having this moment where I was like, I really love tattoos, and how can I get into that medium? And that's where I am now. I'm a working tattoo Padawan, working with skin and coming from a digital art background. A lot of my inspiration is actually drawn from a lot of my friends from around the world, or even local artists. My friend Justin White, my friend Ashley, Megan, the Naked Neighbor. It's these influences by other people that, again, it creates this community of artists that are just supporting each other and driving each other to be like, I love what you're doing, let's keep this going. And it's not ever cutthroat, you know. If somebody wants to do a giant portraiture of something, you know, I would direct them to some of my most favorite painting artists. Whereas other artists around here, if they needed some type of digital work or anything like that, they would direct it to me. And so like, it's this huge community helping each other without creating roadblocks. It's very beautiful to see the Boise art scene grow and be able to push each other towards what we are now. Whether you're a musician, whether you're a person that makes jewelry, or you're a painter, or a digital artist, like, I feel because of our community being so small, it has this huge potential and growth to give back as it expands. And I think, you know, over these years, more and more artists are going to come in, and that sense of community, I'm really hoping will stay within to, you know, cause that wonderful growth that is happening right now. Like, you can't walk around downtown nowadays without noticing some of the most amazing artists that have, you would have never seen that years ago, because, you know, people would have considered it graffiti or not tasteful. But now it's, I mean, when Tree Fort hits, it's like the whole town is gorgeous, and it's like this musical, artistic parade. And that's another thing that I feel grew from the whole art community was Tree Fort. It was like, how can we come together and with musicians and artists and food and fruit and beer and, you know, celebrate each other. And I think that's very key to Boise right now, is the community. I had this moment where I realized that art was driving me. It was the passion that, at the end of the day, who cares about the day job when you have this passion that you're pouring every single minute into, and someday it could show fruition of something beautiful. One of my favorite accomplishments is I got to work with my friend Daniel with Paddles at Poke, and you could go downtown and you could go check out one of my pieces that he has displayed on his restaurant. And that same piece is now in over like 700 copies of magazines throughout resorts of Idaho. And like, that right there is like a huge, you know, hit to my heart, and like, it feels like an accomplishment, and it wouldn't have been done without the community of Boise just like driving each other to be better and boost each other up. And that right there is why I still do it.
My primary medium is enameling, so I enamel and weld. I was taking a class at Boise State University during my master's degree with John Kilmaster, and he wheeled in a kiln one day in that painting class, and I couldn't keep my eyes off of what he was doing, and it just enamored me. It was like magic, and I had begged him to teach me how to do one piece, and that absolutely changed the whole course of my life. The enameling, just the idea of being able to do forms in glass, I was like, wow, that's gonna blow me out of the water. I mean, doing flat panel work was really exciting, but I've always done like ceramics, I've always done weaving, 3D stuff. I was always really wanting to make things with my hands, and I don't know, I just had a natural rapport with copper. The working the metal just seemed really intrinsic to me, just seemed like a natural fit, and I just thought it was the most beautiful thing to see it under, you know, to melt the metal and move it. It was like liquid gold under the mask. It was just, I could move it wherever I wanted. It was just so exciting to see that I could create these three-dimensional forms and then put glass on them, fuse glass to it. I don't know why I have to be a maker. And I ask myself that question often. because I don't understand why I have to make objects. It doesn't literally make sense to me. Why would I want to be, what is it about this that I can't get enough of? Because it's such a hard business to be in, and it's just so hard to make a living at it that I could do a lot of other things. But I can't stop. And so there's just something in me that it helps me in my day, it helps me relate to other people. I absolutely love collaborating with other artists. I love learning. Never gonna get tired of trying something new and exploring and being, just always moving forward, and so I don't know what it is. I've asked myself that. It's a great question. Why do you have to make things? Barbacoa was a big change for me. I'd never made anything public before where I could influence or see the response really in such a grand way. And so when we opened Barbacoa and I did the Medusa sculpture, I kind of just sat in the back and just kind of wanted to see the response, negative or positive. And I think that's a big part of making art is just having people ask the question and creating conversation, and maybe also helping people, inspiring people to do something new or try something new. I really, if I could leave something behind when I die, I would really hope that I leave the legacy that I helped people, especially kids. I'm always excited to see what's next. This medium is so exciting because it's never the same for me. I get excited by what other things I can try or push the envelope with. I don't know the end result. I just know that I'm going somewhere, and where it's going to take me is the exciting part. I don't know. I mean, I have an idea in my head, but then it could go anywhere, and I think that's what gets me up. And there's just not going to be enough. There's not going to be enough life in me to do everything that I want to try. And I think that I get annoyed by the fact that time is running out, it seems like. The older I get, I'm like, come on, I need more time for all this stuff I want to do. I mean, you have to make your space comfortable for you to be creative in, and you also have to make it organized so that you're efficient. For me, I'm efficiency. I like to know where those tools are and go back and get them. So that's really, what my medium, it just takes a lot of space. There's a lot of powders, there's just a lot of it's welding. So I need a lot of room. I mean, I started out I've had all sorts of different studios, from porches to dirt floor garages to, I'll work in anything. I'll make it happen. Like right now, I'm working at my house and working in my one-car garage, which I never thought I'd be doing again after owning a building downtown. But it doesn't matter. I'll make it happen. But it does help to have your space set up. I think any artist you ever talk to, retirement is not an option. We don't retire from this. We may just get tired of doing what we're doing in it. But no, I'm hopeful that my business will continue in the hands of maybe someone else, but that I will always, there'll never be a day when I'm not gonna make art. I hope I'm welding when I'm 70 and 80 years old, if I can keep this body together.
I like to work in 3D medium. I think I have a pretty good mind for three-dimensional structure, and I'm also fascinated by light. So lamps, also fascinated by animals and the proportions of them, how that works. There was a challenge that a friend of mine posted online a few years ago. The challenge was simply to make something out of paper. I had a lamp in my home, like a hanging lamp in the entryway, and I really did not like the cover. It was a very cheap cover on it, so I decided to make one out of paper. It was just a geometric pattern, simple printer paper folded over, but I really liked how it turned out. Really, my background is not in art. I have no formal education in art. My background is actually in engineering. When I first moved to Boise, I was working at MawkOne as a semiconductor engineer. That isn't a background that I think translates well to art, you wouldn't think, but engineering does have some benefits when it comes to art. When it comes to shape and proportion. I don't have the artistic sensibility to say, take a lump of clay and shape it into something that, say, looks like a giraffe. However, I can take measurements off of pictures. I can build up an Excel spreadsheet that has different measurements all over it and use that as a stepping stone to start shaping out the structure of something. So it does end up looking, in the end, organic and natural and properly shaped. I do think sometimes that that I should have gone to art school instead, that it would have enriched my art more, and I'm sure it would have. I think if I had, though, I would be doing different projects. And I don't know if that would be good or bad, but if it wasn't for an engineering background, I would not be doing projects like this, I don't think. I've always felt driven by creative projects, though. I tried writing at one point, creative writing. I've done some metal casting of just backyard metal casting of simple things like vegetables, simple patterns, mushrooms cast up very well. I've done some drawing lately and a little bit of painting within the last couple years. Inspiration is really something you can't search for very easily. It has to come to you. Nature, for sure, is an inspiration. Animals of all sorts, really. The proportions and how those proportions can be transformed into a work of art through sculpture. These particular pieces were done on a very short timeline. It was about a little over 2 months from when we first came up with the idea and started fabrication to the event where they were shown. So it was a marathon run to get them done. I'm happy that they came out pretty well. I'm happy that people got to see them. And I'm happy that they are still here, and I can continue working on them and refining them a little more so that they can be out for other events in the future. There is a great artistic community here in Boise. I think Boise is particularly accessible for amateur artists, up-and-coming artists. I think there's a lot of opportunities here. I mean, here at Jump, they've got events, couple events throughout the year, which they're always looking for collaborators, and that's how I first got started here, was just a couple of years ago. I think it's a matter of sanity. I think I really will go crazy if I'm not creating. It's an outlet I need. It's a distraction. When things get difficult, it is something that makes me feel alive.
Tattooing, definitely. I also paint, but I spend a lot more time tattooing. My dad was a really great artist, and so as soon as I could hold a pencil or a crayon, or, I wanted to do like he did. So I've always drawn. I've dabbled in a lot of different mediums, but it was only when I started tattooing that I was like, this is it, Because before that I had a lot of preconceived notions about the types of people that got tattoos and stuff, like as a kid, I was like, especially back, 80s and 90s and stuff, the people that had tattoos were kind of scary to me. They were older, they seemed like bikers or convicts or something to me, and I was like, ugh. But then my cousin got some work from Eric Payne, and he got a lot of work from him, and it was really cool. And so when I was a teenager, he was showing me all this stuff that Eric Payne had tattooed on him, and I was like, oh, I had no idea that tattoos could be that cool, and big and artistic and different. So then I got a tattoo just kind of on a whim, and I was like, yes, this is it, this is the right medium. For me, I just have to make things. It doesn't matter what it is. I have to make things. Whether, like right now, I'm really focused on like remodeling my house. It doesn't really matter what it is. I really have to create stuff. I also make music, Sometimes it's time to paint, sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's time to tattoo for 12 hours a day. Sometimes it's not, you know, but as long as I'm making something, that's the only drive. Because without making stuff, it's really hard for me to keep a good attitude. But if I make things, I always have a good attitude. People here love tattoos. Oh my gosh, like seriously, don't tell all the other tattooers in the world, but it is a wonderful place. People want big, cool tattoos and they want lots of them. We're a very heavily tattooed community per capita, and I travel a lot. I haven't seen very many cities that are as heavily tattooed per capita as Boise, Idaho. So it's like kept well like a secret, but it's a great place for tattooing. I didn't go to college to have as a art major. I did go to college initially, but I did not go as an art major because I couldn't think of a job that I wanted that would involve art. I didn't want to be a graphic designer. You know, I didn't want to be a starving artist either. So when I went to college, I was like, I don't know, I'll figure it out, I guess. And then I got my first tattoo, and then I stopped going to college because I was like, I want to be a tattoo artist. But I'm just super grateful because I realize it's difficult as an artist to make a living doing what you do. And I just try and make sure that I'm worthy of it, you know, work hard to try and maintain that and keep the good work coming. I remember being a young tattooer and thinking, oh, I wish I had a style of my own, you know, looking at older tattooers and being like, gosh, their style is just so them, you know. I wish I had a style. And it just comes with time. And eventually you do enough tattoos that your understanding of what makes a good tattoo becomes more and more set in stone, and that in and of itself is what kind of develops one's style. So after a while it's unavoidable. So now I'm like, man, I wish I could draw a tattoo that didn't look like a Darcy tattoo, you know? Because tattooing is it's a small motor skill kind of art, right? Like I think about people with a little eye loop that paint the little miniatures, you know, like that takes very precision motor skills, and so does tattooing. And those machines are kind of heavy, and you gotta have really good eyesight. And not only do your hands have to be precision, but your arms and your posture and everything's very precision. So at some point, it's gonna go, you know? It's just true, yeah. You don't see a lot of tattooers tattooing past the age of like 65, you know? So after that, I hope to become more of a painter. Then I would have a lot more time to paint, maybe sculpting, I don't know. I always actually wanted to do stop motion animation is actually my secret alternate dream job, because I think that's super cool. Like moving art's really, really, really cool. But so I look forward to when the day comes that I shouldn't be holding a tattoo machine anymore, I'll be doing something else. Like I said, I have to make things, so I have no doubt that I'll always be making things to the extent that my body will let me, you know?
I call myself a painter, but I'm a painter and a drawer because I use, in every single piece I use charcoal, acrylic, paint pens, spray paint. So I'm a mixed media artist, but I refer to myself as a painter. I've been doing art my entire life. I was always that kid that was drawing. I'd win the art contest as a kid, like in school and stuff like that. But I really started diving in pretty seriously when I was 14. It was the summer before high school, and both my parents worked, and I have significantly younger siblings. So I was at home all summer babysitting them, and I just started painting literally every single day and fell in love. Even though I was already really artsy, that's when I really started painting, and now it's my entire life. I work really big, and so having a space having a large space to be able to spread out has really been a game changer for me. I was working out of a bedroom and I had switched around my entire apartment so that my bedroom was just my art studio, and most of that space was just storage for paintings, and now just having an entire series be spread out so I can look at every single piece as I'm working on it and work on them piece by piece has really been a game changer, and I feel like this space, it hasn't even reached its full potential yet. My inspiration for my work comes from my life, really, and what's going on in the world. You know, it might look like just a beautiful piece of art, but really there's deeper meanings behind every single piece. I also find a lot of inspiration from music. Music is a huge part of my life, especially hip-hop music, which is actually how I kind of got started within the art scene, was creating hip-hop portraits, and it's still something that I do today. I think it's a survival mechanism for me. I'm the most myself when I'm creating. So for me, if I'm not painting and I'm not making things, then what am I doing? For me, I guess it's not so much a choice or having a drive to do it. It's like I have to do it in order to be myself and to be like my happiest self. I've just kind of been pursuing more serious pieces and more high quality pieces. I can create a piece of art and sell it. Like that's not hard for me to do. But creating a piece of art that means something and that says something and that's gonna be impactful, that takes time. And I kind of took away the financial element for myself, where I was like, I'm not gonna put the pressure on this. I'm not gonna tell myself, you have to make money with this right now. What you need to do is you need to make good art and the money will come. So that's been my focus for the last year and a half. Art is so important because it connects us. It's a universal language. You can say so much by not saying anything at all, by showing somebody your favorite song or sharing your favorite book or showing a painting. And for me, that's how I communicate, is through art. So that's why it's important. I had a really great opportunity to show art at the Capitol building a few years back, and then I also got to speak on the importance of mental health and asking for help, and how art has saved my life, whether it's music or painting, how my mental health has been directly impacted by art and how it saved me. I think that was a really great opportunity that I got in Boise that I don't think I ever could have gotten anywhere else, because I was a Boise native and I was speaking about art and on a grand platform, and I was able to make a difference because I'm such a huge advocate for mental health. I don't think art is something that I ever can stop doing. I think that, you know, I think about it almost weekly, where I'm like, oh, should I even be doing this? What am I doing? Is it worth it? And the answer is yes, of course it's worth it. This is what makes you you. This is what keeps you alive. So I don't think I'll ever stop making art because I can't. It's everything I am, and it's who I am.
Primary medium now is digital for sure. It's evolved a little bit, and I jumped from digital to I guess traditional, or pen and ink is probably the two I jump between. Inspiration wise, I grew up watching a lot of cartoons, kind of as my babysitter. I remember watching Ninja Turtles or Fred Flintstone, and then, like, you know, trying to draw those eyes, or this is how a turtle shell looks. And that sort of evolved into Ren and Stimpy, which I think is one of my favorite inspirations, along with like Garbage Pail Kids. So I would take a lot of images that they would create and then try to recreate it, and even like sort of Frankenstein them together to make my own artwork. Self-taught for sure. I had really great, a great high school teacher, Miss Shanafelt, and one of the things that stood out with Miss Shanafelt was, you know, I kind of phoned in my art stuff in high school. You know, I would slack off in class, I wouldn't do a great job, and I was a horrible student, so I really needed art and PE to, like, you know, help my GPA, because all my other classes, you know, I was near failing. And I remember going up to the front of the class and her letting me know that she was going to give me a C on my report card, and it was sort of devastating, because I was like, come on, like, I need this grade. And that was the first person I respected in the art world that looked at me and said, like, you're you're better than this. If you'll take this seriously and like you work to your potential, you know, you can get better grades. To be an artist here, I feel really, I guess, lucky in a sense. I think we're still in that medium-sized town, which 10 years ago I would have said small, but we're growing pretty rapidly. So to have roots here creatively from a kid and making those relationships and sort of getting in on these cultural things that Boise has. You know, I remember doing art for the Boise River Festival, which a lot of people probably don't even remember. And then onward, you know, whether it's the Hyde Park Street Fair, or I've sort of embedded myself in the community and the culture that surrounds it. So I do think there's opportunity in Boise, and I kind of take issue with people saying that, like, you know, Boise's art scene is broken in the fact that, like, there's no buyers, there's no one that, like, supports artists. I mean, the internet's available, you know what I mean? I love doing art for people here locally, but that only probably accounts for 60% of the work that I do. A lot of it's from out of state, or even without boundaries, it's through the internet. It's people that have found my Instagram or social media or word of mouth that travels through those avenues. Making art for a living and being able to have a decent lifestyle is something that first off takes a ton of work, but it also takes a little bit of luck, I think. I've had a lot of great mentors in my life. I've had a lot of great opportunities. But with all that stuff, you have to deliver. And I feel like to be able to do art as a living and consistently for a long time, I think you have to be consistent yourself as a business person and making sure that, you know, you're running yourself like a business. You're giving accurate quotes, you're hitting these deadlines, your relationship with the client is good and professional. And I think that's the only way that I've been able to do it is maintaining good relationships and professional ones. Before going completely freelance, I was at an agency and I was in an office downtown, which was, I didn't realize that leaving your personal home space to go to a professional workspace, how important that is. Until I left that agency job, came home, tried to work inside the house, and realized that you almost need a space that helps you think creatively and somewhere where you can sit for 8 or 12 or 14 hours on a project and not be antsy or distracted. So having a studio space that's mine, and that people know, especially my family, when I'm in here, like, you know, I'm on air, like, do not disturb is I think paramount for sure. I don't think I can stop. I think it's a part of my mental health. You know, my wife lives in a different world where she has a very corporate job, and it's very interesting for me to watch. And it's also interesting for me to compare and realize that I just couldn't handle that. I just can't. I mean, the simple answer is I could never stop doing this. As long as my hands and my eyes work, and even if they didn't, I'd probably find a different, you know, make some really ugly pottery or something. No, I just, there's no way I could stop. And honestly, since, you know, it's like a really good piano player, really good guitar player, and, you know, people say, like, oh, it must be so great, you're so lucky to have these talents. Like, those people work on that stuff every day. It becomes like part of them. The number of days that I have not created something or thought about creating something since I was a kid, I could probably count on 2 hands. Like, I have to. My wife makes me sometimes, like, go in your shed and make something because I'm being an asshole. Like, it's kind of how it goes.